The coffee machine hummed to life in the corner of the sunlit kitchen, filling the air with a soft, comforting aroma. Clara Westwood leaned against the marble counter, one hand wrapped around her favorite ceramic mug, the other scrolling through emails on her tablet. The scent of roasted beans mingled with freshly cut lilies from the garden, and through the window the first blush of morning cast a golden sheen across the lawn. It was, to her, the definition of peace. Her home in the suburbs was more than a house. It was a reflection of her. Every room had a purpose, every object had meaning. The beige and cream tones she loved so much flowed through the open-plan space like a whispered melody. Clara had spent years designing this house, molding it with the same care she used for her clients. Every corner exhaled grace. And in the center of it all was her, a woman who had built something stable, beautiful, and hers. Daniel walked in, crisp in his white shirt and navy tie, a man who looked like he had just stepped out of an advertisement. He kissed her forehead as he passed by, murmuring something about a meeting downtown. Clara smiled, only half listening, content to watch him move about like he belonged exactly where he was. That's how their mornings usually went, warm, wordless, easy. There was no chaos, no drama, just the steady rhythm of a well-kept life. By 9, Clara was in her studio, a renovated guest house tucked behind the main property, converted into her design office. It was clean and bright, filled with natural light, fabric samples, and color palettes neatly displayed on tall bookshelves. The morning air was cool, and she opened the windows to let the breeze in. Her company, CW Interiors, had finally begun to attract high-end clients, and her name was starting to circulate in elite design circles. It was a quiet pride she rarely voiced aloud, but it lived in the curve of her lips whenever a new contract landed in her inbox. Still, the momentum was growing fast, and she needed help. That's when Jasmine Moore arrived. Clara first met her at the interview 2 weeks ago. Jasmine had walked in wearing a pale blue blouse and black slacks, professional but not stiff. Her resume was clean, her references glowing. What had struck Clara the most wasn't her education or credentials, but the way Jasmine listened. She didn't interrupt. She didn't try too hard. She responded with warmth and grace, her words thoughtful, her tone composed. It felt easy, effortless, like someone who would blend into the environment rather than challenge it. Today was Jasmine's first official day. Clara had set out a folder on her desk with the onboarding materials, along with a handwritten welcome note. She liked small gestures. They mattered. Jasmine arrived right on time, 8:55 sharp. She stepped inside, her smile radiant but not overdone, her presence neat and intentional. Clara watched her walk in and for a brief second felt that rare flutter of relief, the kind you get when you know you've made the right choice. "Good morning, Clara," Jasmine said, her voice soft but clear. "Morning. Everything ready for your first day?" Clara gestured toward the desk, giving her space. "Yes, thank you. This place is beautiful," Jasmine replied, running her eyes along the high ceilings and polished concrete floor. Clara offered a modest smile. "I designed it myself, but I'm sure we'll make it even better together." The first half of the day passed without a hitch. Jasmine picked up tasks easily. She didn't ask too many questions, but when she did, they were intelligent ones. She learned the client database quickly, memorized the studio's layout within an hour, and even offered to organize the sample room while waiting for her next task. Clara observed from a distance, a sense of calm building inside her. It had been a long time since she trusted someone else in her workspace, and yet here was Jasmine, moving as if she belonged, not as an intrusion, but as a compliment. By the afternoon, Jasmine had joined Clara for a site visit. They drove in Clara's SUV to a client's penthouse project across town. During the ride, their conversation flowed surprisingly well. Jasmine didn't dominate, but she wasn't shy either. She spoke of her time in New York, her previous job at a boutique firm, and her love for minimalist architecture. Clara listened, occasionally laughing or nodding, finding her presence easy to be around. She liked her. They returned late, tired but satisfied. Clara dropped Jasmine off near the metro station and drove home, the car quiet and filled with soft jazz. She felt good. It had been a productive day, a balanced one. Nothing remarkable, but satisfying in its own quiet way. At dinner, Daniel asked about Jasmine. "So, the new girl, what's she like?" Clara paused for a moment. "She's capable, fast learner, I think she'll make things easier for me. He nodded. That's good. You've been needing help. There was no reason to think twice about his interest. Daniel asked about her work all the time. And yet, something about the way he chewed his food, then looked down, only briefly, lingered for half a second longer than usual. Clara dismissed it. After dinner, she sat in her study, replying to a few more emails. Jasmine had already sent a thank you message for the day, with a few follow-up notes and a list of things she'd like to get more familiar with. Clara appreciated that kind of initiative. It was rare. She closed her laptop around midnight, the house silent, the air cool. She climbed into bed next to Daniel, who had already fallen asleep. His breathing was steady. One hand loosely rested over the comforter. Clara turned off the light. In the darkness, she thought of the day. Not of Daniel, not of dinner, not even of the emails. She thought of Jasmine, of her steady steps, her gentle voice, her knowing eyes, not in suspicion, not in jealousy, just a note of awareness, a flicker of attention, the kind you don't notice until later, until the frame begins to crack. But tonight, the picture was still perfect, and Clara Westwood, despite everything, still believed it always would be. It didn't take long for Jasmine to become part of the rhythm of Clara's studio. She worked with quiet confidence, taking initiative without overstepping. She remembered client names after a single meeting, adjusted lighting before photo shoots without being asked, and anticipated Clara's needs like someone who had been working there for years. Within 2 weeks, she had reorganized the material samples, updated the inventory system, and even suggested a new supplier who offered better prices for imported Italian tiles. Clara was impressed, grateful even. When clients came in, they complimented Clara's designs, but they also praised Jasmine for her professionalism. "You've got a real gem here," one client said after a consultation. Clara smiled, proud of her team. "I think so too," she replied, though a quiet echo inside her mind noted how often Jasmine's name came up lately, more than she expected. One Wednesday afternoon, Clara returned from a quick run to the flower market and found Jasmine already in the studio, flipping through a lookbook with Daniel sitting across from her. They were laughing. Not loud or inappropriate, but familiar. Daniel didn't notice Clara enter right away. Jasmine did. She stood and greeted her with a smile, businesslike and polite. Clara nodded, forcing away a strange stiffness in her chest. "I was just showing Jasmine that New York loft project from your portfolio," Daniel said casually. "Still one of my favorites." Clara set the flowers down on the console. "That was 4 years ago." "Exactly," he said, standing. "Timeless. I told her your best work is when you follow your instincts, not the trends." Clara gave him a thin smile. Jasmine stood to the side, her hands folded neatly in front of her. "It's a beautiful project," she said. "You have an incredible eye for space." "Thank you," Clara said. "Why don't we get started on the Phillips presentation, Jasmine?" Daniel stepped out with a kiss on Clara's cheek before heading back to his office downtown. Jasmine returned to her desk, her posture as straight and respectful as always. Still, the image of them laughing lingered in Clara's mind longer than it should have. She told herself it was nothing. They were in the same space for 5 minutes. They shared a brief moment of light conversation. She had no reason to doubt anything. But still, small things began to accumulate, little details that Clara wouldn't have noticed before, but once seen, couldn't be unseen. Jasmine's phone, for instance, often lit up with messages that she would quickly swipe away when Clara passed by. Or the time she wore a sleek black blazer that Clara recognized instantly as the same one she had loaned to her friend, but never got back. Jasmine laughed when asked, "Oh, I found it in the sample rack. I thought it was part of the styling set," she said. Clara didn't press it. Then there were the coffee runs. Jasmine insisted on getting everyone's coffee orders herself every morning, even though Clara had never required it. At first, it felt thoughtful, another small gesture that made her indispensable. But one morning, when Clara had a meeting and came in late, she noticed 2 coffee cups in the trash, both with Daniel's name spelled correctly. Not Dan, not Dane, as most baristas would write, but Daniel, written out in Jasmine's neat handwriting. She made a mental note but said nothing. Friday evening came with a light drizzle, and Clara had stayed behind to finish revisions for a coastal villa project. Jasmine was still in the studio too, quietly organizing a sample drawer in the corner. Clara finally closed her laptop and stretched. "You should head home, Jasmine," she said. "It's late." "I just wanted to finish this drawer," Jasmine said, standing and brushing lint from her skirt. "It helps me relax." Clara smiled, tired. "You're making me look lazy." "You're the boss," Jasmine replied with a soft laugh. "You're allowed." It sounded harmless, but as Jasmine packed her things, Clara's eyes caught on a navy umbrella leaning against the coat rack. Daniel's. She remembered it clearly. It had a monogram on the handle, a gift from her on their anniversary 2 years ago. She picked it up. "Daniel left this here?" Jasmine glanced over. "Oh, I think he dropped it when he stopped by this afternoon. He said it was going to rain." Clara nodded slowly. "Right." But Daniel hadn't mentioned stopping by. She tried to recall where he had said he'd be earlier. Something about a lunch with a client in Midtown. She didn't remember him mentioning the studio. And yet, his umbrella was here, in Jasmine's corner. Again, she said nothing. That night, as Clara soaked in a warm bath with lavender salts and candles flickering on the counter, she stared at the ceiling in silence. Her skin tingled from the heat, but her mind drifted elsewhere in their laughter, Jasmine's poised smile, the little things that didn't quite add up. She wasn't the jealous type. She hated women who jumped to conclusions, who saw threats in every young assistant who blamed others for their own husband's distance. And yet, she couldn't stop replaying the tiny moments. Not because they were damning, but because they weren't. They were too perfect, too polished. Jasmine was always in the right place at the right time. She always had the perfect response, the right expression. She never said too much, never crossed a line, always 2 steps behind, but never out of sight. Clara had built her life around order and balance. She had trusted her instincts to design beautiful spaces for others. Now she wondered if her own space, her own life, had been carefully rearranged when she wasn't looking. Not wrecked, not broken, just redecorated, ever so slightly, by an extra pair of hands. And maybe, just maybe, a pair of eyes that had seen more than they should. Clara noticed it the same way one notices the seasons change, not all at once, but in degrees. The mornings were still warm, the coffee still brewed, and Daniel still kissed her cheek before leaving for work. But his hand didn't linger on her back like it used to. His eyes didn't meet hers when she spoke across the breakfast table. He still smiled, still laughed at her jokes. Just a second too late, just a note too flat. He had started working later. At first, it made sense. He was a corporate lawyer. Long hours came with the territory. But the shifts were sudden. 1 night a week became 3. Business trips cropped up more often. Once, when Clara surprised him at his office with lunch, he wasn't there. His assistant said he was out for a client briefing. She smiled, accepted the explanation, then drove home with the lunch untouched beside her in the passenger seat. He also smelled different. Not bad, just not the same. Daniel had always worn cedarwood cologne, earthy, subtle. Now it was something sharper, sandalwood, maybe, mixed with a hint of something floral, almost feminine. Clara asked about it once. "Oh, they discontinued my usual one," he said. "Picked something new on the way back from Chicago." He said it like it didn't matter, and maybe it didn't, but she remembered choosing his old cologne together at a boutique downtown. She remembered how he said it reminded him of their first trip to the cabin in Vermont. She remembered that, even when he changed his ties or his favorite whiskey, the scent never changed. And now it had. She told herself she was overthinking. People changed colognes. People worked late. People forgot to answer texts right away because they were busy, not because they were avoiding you. Still, the signs were there, like thin cracks under glossy paint. At the studio, Jasmine became increasingly present, not just efficient, but visible. Her outfits, once classic and demure, leaned into sleeker silhouettes. Pencil skirts, silk blouses, the occasional open back. Nothing inappropriate, nothing that couldn't be defended as fashion-forward. But Clara noticed how the men in meetings noticed. She noticed how Jasmine sat straighter when Daniel entered the studio unannounced, how she crossed her legs with deliberate ease, how she tilted her chin slightly higher when speaking around him. She noticed, and she hated that she noticed. During a consultation with a new client, Jasmine lingered in the meeting longer than usual. Clara had expected her to take notes, then quietly excuse herself. Instead, she contributed suggestions on color palettes and materials. Nothing wildly off base, but assertive. When Clara gently redirected the conversation, Jasmine simply smiled and nodded as if she hadn't overstepped at all. Afterward, Clara sat at her desk, flipping through fabric samples, but her focus was blurry. Jasmine had gone home early that day, citing a dentist appointment. Clara thought about how Jasmine always left her perfume behind. It was faint but distinct, a soft blend of vanilla and something Clara couldn't name. It clung to the chairs, to the edge of the entryway rug. Clara used to like the scent. Now it irritated her. It wasn't just Daniel who was distant. It was as if Clara's whole life had begun to shift 1 inch to the left while she wasn't paying attention. She still woke up in the same bed, still walked into the same office, but things didn't feel the same. Daniel called less during the day. Jasmine seemed more familiar with Clara's schedule than Clara herself. Her inbox filled with follow-up emails Jasmine had already replied to, things already handled before she could lift a finger. It was helpful. It was too helpful. One evening, Clara stood in the kitchen chopping carrots for dinner and caught herself frowning at nothing. Just standing there, knife paused mid-slice, trying to remember the last time she and Daniel had laughed. Not polite laughter, real laughter. The kind that made your chest ache and your eyes water. She couldn't recall. When Daniel came home that night, she turned from the sink and said, "We haven't gone out in a while, just the two of us." He loosened his tie. "I've just been swamped. You know how it is." "I do," she said, then hesitated. "Still, maybe this weekend? Dinner? Let's see how the week plays out." He smiled, tired. "Maybe Sunday." Maybe. Later in bed, Clara lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She told herself she was being paranoid, that it was stress, that she needed to sleep, that Jasmine was just a great assistant, not some femme fatale in an office romance drama. Not every young, stylish woman was a threat. Not every husband who changed cologne was having an affair. She almost laughed at herself. Was this how women became insecure? She didn't want to be that person. Snooping through phones, checking receipts, stalking Instagram stories. She had always believed in trusting until proven otherwise. Relationships were not interrogation rooms, but something in her had shifted. And it wasn't just doubt. It was something more fragile. There was a picture on her nightstand, her and Daniel at a gala last year. They looked perfect, elegant, successful. She reached out and turned it face down. For now, she would say nothing. Ask nothing, because there was still no proof, no text, no lipstick stain, no damning hotel key. Just a man who no longer looked at her the same way. Just a woman who started as an extra pair of hands, and now seemed to hold more than her share. And Clara, deep down, was afraid to admit what her instincts had begun to whisper. Sometimes it's not what you see, it's what's no longer there. The sound of the trash bin lid clicking shut was so ordinary that Clara didn't think much of it. She had walked into the kitchen to toss out a ruined draft of a mood board. Too cluttered, too loud for the client's taste. It was late afternoon, the sun stretching through the windows in long golden stripes, and the air smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. Her hand brushed against a crumpled paper, already lying in the bin. Something about the paper, the weight of it maybe, felt wrong. She shouldn't have unfolded it. She knew better than to go digging, even accidentally. But she did. It was a hotel receipt. A sleek, glossy thermal print from the Rosegate Hotel downtown. One of those luxury places with mood lighting and spa bathtubs and champagne on arrival. The bill wasn't long. A single night. Room service. One guest. Paid in full. Her eyes slid to the bottom where the signature sat, slanted and rushed but unmistakable. Daniel Westwood. For a moment, Clara didn't move. She didn't blink. The air around her thickened. The receipt felt cold in her hand, even though the house was warm. She set it on the counter, walked into her office, and pulled up the company card transactions. Daniel had access, limited, for when he helped process client payments. Her fingers moved with surgical calm, no shaking, no panic. There it was, the charge. Dated last Friday, the same evening he said he had to work late on a merger call. Same amount, same location. Her chest didn't tighten, her hands didn't tremble. She just sat there, staring at the monitor as if the numbers might shift if she looked hard enough. But they didn't. It was real. He had used her business account, her studio, her money, to book a night at a hotel, alone or not alone. She didn't say anything when Daniel came home. He kissed her cheek, commented on the pasta she left warming on the stove. She nodded, said she had a headache, and returned to her studio. He didn't ask. He never followed. The studio felt like a shelter that night, like the only space that was truly hers. She turned off the main lights and let the soft track lights glow across her fabric shelves. Her tablet sat beside a mood board in progress, and her coffee was still warm. She didn't drink it. Instead, she sat on the velvet sofa by the window, the hotel receipt folded neatly beside her, like some kind of cruel invitation. Outside, the wind rustled the hedges. A dog barked a few houses down. Inside, everything stayed still. She looked around at the sketches, the paint samples, the CAD renderings lined up on the walls. Every piece represented hours of her life. Late nights, endless edits, conversations with clients, sometimes even tears. She had built all of it. She had taken a small idea and carved it into something elegant, respected, lasting. And he had taken this, and stained it. Not just her marriage, her work, the things she loved. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was professional, financial, intentional. Clara breathed in slowly, the kind of breath that isn't meant to calm you, but to hold back the collapse waiting just underneath. Her mind ran in clear, cold circles. Jasmine. Of course, she didn't know for sure. The receipt didn't say her name. But Clara wasn't stupid. There had been signs. The umbrella, the shared laughter, the faint perfume. The shift in energy when Jasmine entered the room, Daniel was already in. The second coffee cup with his name spelled just right. It was too much to ignore now. The silence she'd kept out of grace had turned against her. The small things she'd brushed off, chalked up to being tired or too sensitive, now stacked like bricks on her chest. She picked up the receipt again and ran her thumb across Daniel's signature, that pen stroke she'd seen 1,000 times, on birthday cards, on legal documents, on the wedding certificate tucked somewhere in the safe. A signature didn't lie. It was his. And this was hers, her company, her card. There were no tears, not yet, maybe not ever. Something colder had taken their place. She turned off her tablet, folded her arms, sat back into the sofa and stared at the wall across from her, where a giant rendering of her upcoming luxury townhouse project hung. Neutral tones, clean lines, warm lighting. She remembered sketching the first lines of that plan on a napkin over dinner with Daniel. He had said, "It's your best idea yet." Funny, now it all felt like decoration over something hollow. She didn't sleep, didn't try to. She sat in silence as the night passed and the dark sky slowly gave way to pale light. No music, no calls, no sound but her own breath, steady and sharp. By morning, she knew what she would do. Not scream, not confront, not fall apart, not yet. First, she would wait. She would see if he lied again. And when he did, she wouldn't cry. She would remember, because sometimes the most dangerous woman in the room isn't the one who yells, it's the one who already knows. The studio buzzed with quiet energy that morning. The scent of espresso lingered in the air, mixing with hints of fresh eucalyptus from the vases near the reception desk. The team had gathered around the long oak conference table for the Monday morning meeting, unaware that something irreversible was about to happen. Clara arrived 5 minutes late, unusual for her. She was dressed sharply in a tailored white blazer over a black satin blouse, the kind of contrast that made her presence feel both refined and untouchable. Her heels clicked against the floor with a rhythm that didn't rush, but didn't hesitate. Jasmine was already seated, her tablet in hand, lips curled into her usual pleasant smile. She wore a deep plum dress Clara had never seen before, cinched at the waist, just bold enough to draw the eye. She looked up as Clara entered and greeted her with that calm, honeyed tone that used to sound reassuring. "Morning, Clara." Clara didn't respond. Instead, she walked to the head of the table, placed her laptop down, and then, very deliberately, set a folded piece of paper in the center of the table. She didn't sit. The team looked between each other, confused but silent. Clara's voice was quiet, clear, measured. "Before we begin," she said, eyes locked on Jasmine, "I need to address something that can't wait." Jasmine's fingers froze on her tablet. She straightened slightly, smile faltering. "Is something wrong?" Clara tilted her head. "Why don't you take a look?" she said, gesturing toward the paper. Jasmine glanced down. She didn't move. "Go on. It's just a receipt." Clara added, her tone light, almost amused. I figured you'd recognize it. Jasmine hesitated, then reached out and unfolded it. The moment her eyes fell on the hotel name, the color in her face changed. It wasn't obvious, just a flicker, a barely there flicker. Clara, I think? No, Clara cut in, smooth and final. Don't insult both of us with a performance. The room was dead silent, only the sound of the ceiling fan stirred the air. I've seen it all, Clara continued, voice soft but steel-edged. The hotel receipt, the company card charge, the umbrella in your corner, the perfume that doesn't belong to this office. Oh, and the matching coffee orders? Subtle. I'll give you that. Jasmine opened her mouth again, but Clara's raised hand stopped her like a wall. This isn't a discussion. You were hired to assist me, not to sleep with my husband using my money and my business as the backdrop. Someone in the room gasped, quietly but audibly. I'm letting you go. Immediately. You'll receive a formal termination email within the hour. Your final paycheck will be processed, minus the unauthorized charge. Jasmine's voice came out strained now. Clara, this is a misunderstanding. I swear, Daniel and I should both learn not to leave evidence in the trash, Clara finished, smiling tightly. Don't worry, I'm not emotional. This isn't about love. It's about betrayal and theft. Jasmine stood slowly, her chair creaking. Her usual poise cracked just slightly. Can we talk in private? Clara raised an eyebrow. Why? So you can lie more comfortably? Jasmine looked at the others in the room, aware now of the eyes on her, the murmurs barely contained. You're humiliating me, she whispered. No, Clara said, voice still low, unflinching. You did that to yourself the moment you crossed into my life like you owned it. She stepped back from the table, still calm, still composed. Pack your things, now. Jasmine didn't move for a few seconds, then nodded stiffly and left the room. No one spoke. Clara turned to her stunned team and offered a polite smile. Sorry for the interruption. Now, where were we on the Seaforth project? The rest of the meeting was a blur, and Clara knew it. No one truly focused after that, but she didn't care. She had said what needed to be said, with no yelling, no crying, no desperate plea for justice, only facts, only control. Afterward, she returned to her office and shut the door. The silence felt heavy, but not suffocating. For the first time in weeks, the air felt honest. Daniel hadn't called. Of course he hadn't. He wouldn't expect her to know. He wouldn't expect this. But she wasn't done. Not yet. Today was just the beginning. The house felt too quiet now, even though it had never been loud. Clara stood in the bedroom she once called theirs, the soft linen curtains billowing slightly from the open window. The sun still came through in the same gentle way, lighting up the cream-colored walls, but it no longer warmed her. Everything was in place, immaculate, tasteful, but felt like it belonged to someone else now. Maybe it always had. Daniel stood near the dresser, arms folded. He didn't look angry. He didn't look ashamed either. He just looked tired, like someone ready to be done with a task. I never meant to hurt you, he said. Clara didn't answer. She sat on the edge of the bed, holding the divorce papers in her lap. The pages were thick, heavy with the weight of legality. Her name was printed cleanly, Clara Marie Westwood, a name that had carried grace, a name she had signed on business contracts, interior plans, and greeting cards for nearly 8 years. Daniel shifted his weight and ran a hand through his hair. You know, for a long time, I felt like I was married to a brand, not a person. That made her look up. Her voice came out quieter than she expected. A brand? You're perfect, Clara. Everything's always polished. Every outfit, every table setting, even your moods are designed. I didn't feel like I belonged in your world anymore. Clara looked back down at the papers. So, you found someone, Messier? He flinched, just slightly. That's not fair. No, Daniel, she said, still calm. It's not fair. None of this is. She signed the last page with a slow, deliberate motion. No drama, no trembling hands. The sound of the pen scratching the paper was the only noise in the room. She stood, held the papers out to him. He took them without meeting her eyes. I'll send them to my lawyer in the morning, he said. She nodded, then added, You can keep the house. He blinked. You sure? Yes, I want something smaller, something real. The words surprised even her. But once she said them, they felt right. The house had become a monument to a life that no longer existed. Every hallway reminded her of who she tried to be for him. Every carefully curated corner felt like a lie she had agreed to live in. 2 weeks later, Clara carried the last of her boxes up the narrow staircase to the apartment above her studio. It wasn't large. One bedroom, a kitchen that barely fit 2 stools, and a living room just wide enough for a sofa and a desk, but it was hers. She had painted the walls a warm off-white and opened the windows so the air smelled like the pine trees outside. The first night alone in the apartment was quiet. She sat on the floor, eating takeout straight from the box, watching city lights blink in the distance. There were no curtains yet, no framed photos, just a notebook and a glass of wine beside her. She wrote CW Interiors at the top of the page, then crossed it out. Below it, she wrote Clara Westwood Design. No frills, no & co, no partner, no shadows. She stared at the name for a long time, not because she doubted it, but because it felt strange seeing it stand on its own, unapologetically. The next few days blurred into work. There was no time to sulk. Clients still needed her, deadlines still loomed, and she still had a business to run, now under her own name alone. She ordered new business cards, rebuilt her website, met with her printer to redesign the logo. Going solo, the printer asked. Yes, she said, smiling faintly. Turns out I work better alone. It wasn't anger that pushed her. It wasn't revenge. It was clarity, a quiet knowing that she could move forward, not despite what had happened, but because of it. There were moments, of course, when the silence felt too wide. When she reached for her phone to text Daniel something small, something like, "Remember the cafe we loved in Paris? They just opened one in Midtown," and stopped halfway. When she caught a glimpse of a man in a navy suit from behind and her heart jumped, only to realize it wasn't him. When she heard Jasmine's name mentioned in passing and her spine stiffened involuntarily. But the grief didn't drown her. It visited, then passed. Some nights she worked late into the evening, drafting layouts and color concepts. She lost track of time. Her apartment above became a refuge, not a retreat. The walls began to hold her shape. One morning, while walking into the studio with a coffee in one hand and rolled up blueprints in the other, Clara caught her reflection in the window. She paused. She didn't look broken or hollow or bitter. She just looked different. No wedding ring, no perfect composure. Just Clara, no more Mrs. Westwood. And for the first time in years, that didn't feel like a loss. It felt like a beginning. The old sign came down on a quiet Thursday morning. The metal letters, Westwood & Co., had once gleamed proudly on the studio's facade, a testament to the name she had carried and the image she had built. Now they clattered to the ground with a dull, satisfying thud. Clara stood nearby, arms crossed, watching the workers unscrew the last bolt without blinking. By noon, the new sign was up. Sleek, minimalist, a matte black plate with soft gold lettering. CW Interiors. No flourish, no sentiment. Clara had expected to feel something when it changed. Regret, maybe, or some soft ache in her chest. But all she felt was clarity, like wiping a fogged mirror and finally seeing the truth of your own face. The rebranding was more than cosmetic. She went through every document, every contract, and every logo template with a fine-tooth comb. She updated her client lists, made new pitch decks, and quietly terminated 2 vendors who had always deferred to Daniel instead of her. She knew the business inside out. Now she ran it without permission, without second-guessing. Clients noticed the change almost immediately. Some were discreet. A few sent polite emails asking gently, "Hope everything's okay." Others were more direct. One called and said, "I heard about you and Daniel. I'm sorry, but to be honest, I'm excited to see what you do next." Clara never offered explanations. She didn't owe any. She started saying yes to projects she would have hesitated over before. Quirky remodels, tiny urban apartments, and rebranding workspaces for local startups. They didn't bring in the prestige of luxury clients, but they offered freedom, bold lines, risky choices. She let herself try color combinations that once felt too loud for her brand. She played with textures, layered eras, and leaned into imperfections. Clients loved it. One client, a single mother with a tiny walk-up apartment and a dream to open a book cafe, teared up when Clara showed her the final layout. "It actually feels like me," she whispered. Clara smiled, quiet and sure. That's what it's supposed to feel like. The studio itself changed too. She let in more natural light, added green plants, swapped the stiff conference chairs for soft, curved ones. Jasmine's desk was gone now, replaced with an open shelf full of hand-drawn mood boards and fabric swatches. The energy shifted. It no longer felt like a showroom for someone else's life. It finally reflected hers. Still, she kept her distance. Not out of fear, but out of choice. She didn't linger during meetings. She didn't make small talk over coffee anymore. She stopped entertaining dinner invitations from people who smiled too hard or asked questions with a little too much curiosity in their eyes. She answered with polite brevity, then moved on. People whispered, of course. Divorce stories always traveled fast. Some assumed she was devastated. Others claimed she must have known all along. There were rumors about Jasmine, too. One said she was now Daniel's live-in partner, another that she had taken a job at a firm in another city. Clara never asked, never checked, because none of it mattered now. What mattered was that her calendar was full, her invoices were paid on time, and her ideas flowed like water again. One afternoon, after presenting a concept to a young couple renovating their first home, Clara walked back into the studio and stood by the window. The sky was pale gray, clouds hanging low, the kind that threatened rain but held back just enough. She sipped her coffee, black, no sugar, and watched people pass on the street below. She didn't feel victorious. She felt right. Not because everything was fixed, but because she wasn't pretending anymore. Her heart still hurt in quiet ways, when she walked past their old restaurant or when a certain song played while she organized tile samples, but the pain no longer led her. It lived with her now, and it was fading into something else, a sharpness, a focus, the kind that builds something better, not on what was lost, but on what remained. Ashes, after all, are rich soil. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, nestled between vendor invoices and a client proposal. A thick cream-colored envelope with gold lettering, carefully embossed and sealed with wax. Clara almost didn't open it. It looked like the kind of thing people sent when they wanted to show off, not connect, but curiosity got the better of her. Inside, the card was elegant and over-designed, more flourish than substance. Westmore Atelier, a night of reinvention, hosted by Daniel Westwood and Jasmine Moore. Private design gala, cocktail attire location, the Adler Grand Hall. Date Saturday, 7 p.m. Her breath didn't hitch. Her heart didn't sink. She just stared at it for a moment, the corners of her lips curling into something too subtle to be called a smile. The name, Westmore, was laughable in its predictability. A Frankenstein's monster of Daniel's and Jasmine's surnames stitched together into what they clearly thought sounded high-end. She could almost hear Jasmine pitching it. It's like Westwood, but newer. Clara flipped the card over. Her name had been handwritten at the bottom. Clara Westwood. Invitation extended by client P. Abrams. That explained it. Peter Abrams, a developer she'd recently taken on as a client, had RSVP'd her as his guest, likely unaware of the tangled mess behind the hosts. He had mentioned wanting to introduce her to a few investors. That was all. She almost declined, almost. But then she thought of something more powerful than avoidance. Being seen. Not by them, but by herself. So she went. Saturday evening arrived like thunder behind glass. The Adler Grand Hall was stunning, as expected. Vaulted ceilings, soft amber lighting, waiters moving in silent rhythm with trays of champagne. Guests wore tailored suits and gowns that whispered money, ambition, and curated charm. But no one turned heads like Clara. She entered in a black silk dress that didn't need sequins or shimmer. It fit like it was made for her, which in fact, it had been. She wore her hair swept back, her makeup clean and sharp. No accessories, except a slim gold cuff and the confidence that came from surviving betrayal without collapsing. Heads turned, not because of scandal, because she looked untouchable. A few clients approached her immediately, all wide smiles and congratulations on the recent rebranding. She answered with calm grace, as if she hadn't just walked into the lion's den wearing perfume and war paint. She spotted them across the room near the stage, Daniel and Jasmine. They looked like the cover of a magazine that hadn't been proofread. Jasmine wore red, of course. Daniel was in black tie, his arm possessively looped around her waist as if to remind everyone, this is mine now. Clara didn't approach. She didn't need to. They came to her. Daniel saw her first. His expression flickered. A moment of surprise, maybe regret, maybe just annoyance. Jasmine noticed a second later, her body tensing slightly, her smile tightening. But Clara just stood there, mid-conversation with a designer from Milan, laughing at something casually said. It wasn't forced, it wasn't staged, she was simply living, and she was magnetic. Jasmine excused herself from Daniel's side and approached, alone. "Clara?" she said, voice honeyed with just the right note of condescension. "I wasn't expecting to see you here." "I was invited," Clara replied evenly, sipping her champagne. "Didn't know you had taken up party planning." Jasmine's smile stayed in place. "It's more than that. Westmore is our vision, a fresh take, design without boundaries. It's different from what you used to do." Clara tilted her head. "You mean what you used to observe?" Jasmine's jaw twitched, barely. "We're excited. The galas had great feedback." "I'm sure." Clara's gaze drifted across the hall, where a wall display showcased digital renderings, the layout, the color palettes, the taglines. It all looked familiar, not copied outright, but borrowed, heavily. The same tone Clara had pioneered, now repackaged with cheap novelty. "I suppose imitation really is the sincerest form of flattery," Clara said softly, her smile calm and sharp. "Though to be honest, I expected more originality from you two." Jasmine's expression faltered for half a second, then smoothed over again. "It's a competitive world. Ideas evolve." "Mine don't evolve into knockoffs," Clara said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They grow into brands people remember." She turned slightly, allowing her attention to drift back to her waiting company. "Now if you'll excuse me, I promised Peter I'd introduce him to my investor, and your photographer's lighting setup is unbalanced. Too much white on the left side, but I'm sure you already knew that." She walked away without looking back. Later that night, someone asked her if she had seen the hosts. She smiled. "Briefly," she said. "They were still finding their footing." The gala ended without confrontation. No shouting, no scandal. But by morning, the whispers had begun. "Did you see Clara Westwood last night? She looked incredible. And those new designs? She's way ahead." Daniel's smile in the photos looked strained. Jasmine's red dress had smudged slightly along the hem, as if the night had clung to her in all the wrong ways. Clara closed her phone, poured herself a second cup of coffee, and returned to sketching. Because while they had hosted a launch, she had already arrived. Clara never raised her voice. She never called Jasmine or Daniel again. She never slammed doors or posted cryptic messages online. Instead, she chose precision. It began with a carefully worded email sent from an anonymous address to a mid-level journalist at the Design Ledger, a digital magazine known for its deep dives into industry trends and occasional exposés. The email wasn't dramatic. It simply included links to side-by-side renderings, one of Jasmine's original concept for a minimalist boutique in Soho, and the other, a nearly identical student portfolio posted 3 years earlier on an architecture forum. Same floor plan, same lighting angles, even the indoor plant placement matched. No threats, no accusations, just evidence. The journalist didn't reply to the email. Clara hadn't expected him to. But a week later, an article appeared titled, "When Inspiration Crosses the Line, a Growing Trend of Design Plagiarism." Jasmine's name was never mentioned outright, but anyone in the industry could read between the lines. Screenshots blurred, but familiar enough. Jasmine's face didn't appear, but whispers started. Quiet, but sharp. At the same time, Clara reached out to a legal contact she knew well, a quiet, meticulous woman named Laurel who specialized in corporate finance auditing. She handed over a small packet. Inside were 6 printed spreadsheets, copies of internal expense logs Daniel had submitted back when he still had access to Westwood & Co.'s funds. Clara had held on to them, not out of spite, but instinct. Every document was cleanly marked. A few lines showed irregularities, payments to a personal card, receipts labeled under client dinners that matched hotel bookings instead. It wasn't embezzlement, not quite, but it was dishonest. Laurel didn't ask questions. She simply nodded. "I'll take care of it." A week later, one of Daniel's investors, a discreet European backer with a reputation for cutting ties at the first sign of risk, abruptly pulled out of Westmore. No press release, just a clean withdrawal. Jasmine and Daniel tried to manage the fallout, but the damage was done. Clients delayed their projects. One corporate account canceled altogether, citing recent internal concerns. From the outside, nothing appeared chaotic. Their website stayed up. Their branding remained intact. But inside, Westmore was losing its footing. slowly, quietly. Public confidence eroded not in flames, but in drips. Like a leak no one could find, but everyone could feel. Clara said nothing. She worked. She delivered stunning renovations for 2 tech startups and a heritage hotel rebranding. Her social media following doubled in a month, driven by real content. Behind-the-scenes sketches, honest captions, stories of rebuilding. Her name floated through rooms now with admiration, not sympathy. One afternoon, she passed by a cafe near the design district and spotted Jasmine through the window, sitting alone. No makeup, hair undone, phone pressed to her ear. She looked tired, hunched, not broken, but frayed. Clara didn't stop walking. She didn't feel proud, not really, but she felt resolved. She hadn't touched them. She hadn't fabricated anything. She simply let the truth stand in a room full of lies, and it spoke louder than rage ever could. That night, as rain tapped gently against her apartment windows, Clara sat at her desk and lit a small candle. It wasn't a celebration. It wasn't revenge. It was closure. Her empire had never needed noise, only integrity. And now, as theirs trembled from its own weight, she smiled, not because they had fallen, but because she hadn't. It was a cold morning, the kind that whispered of winter long before the leaves had finished falling. The sky outside Clara's studio was silver gray, and the wind tugged gently at the edges of the signage that now bore her name, Clara Westwood Design, clean, understated, and unshakable. Inside, the studio buzzed with quiet purpose. An assistant sorted fabric swatches near the sample wall. Someone else was arranging a model display for the Fitzgerald project. Clara stood near her desk, reviewing a digital rendering for an upcoming pitch, her focus sharp, her expression composed. Then the bell over the door chimed. She didn't look up right away. Not until her assistant called softly, "Miss Westwood, someone's here to see you." When she turned, her breath didn't catch, her knees didn't tremble. She just saw him. Daniel. He looked older, not in years, but in something else, something tired and dulled. His once immaculate blazer was wrinkled, the collar of his shirt slightly askew. His shoes were scuffed. He hadn't shaved. And his eyes, once always 2 steps ahead of everyone else, now carried the hollow haze of someone who had stopped pretending to win. Clara glanced toward the team. "Take 5, please." They nodded and quietly filtered out of the room, leaving only Daniel and Clara in the studio that he once visited like a king, and now entered like a stranger. He didn't speak at first, just stood there, awkward, hands stuffed in his coat pockets. Clara crossed her arms lightly, waiting. "I didn't know where else to go," he said finally, his voice rough. She gave a faint smile, that much is clear. Daniel stepped forward, but not too close. "Jasmine's been arrested. Fraud. It wasn't just the plagiarism. There were fake invoices, money funneled through shell vendors. I didn't know." "I believe you," Clara said simply. He looked surprised, hopeful even. "You do?" "I do," she repeated. "But that doesn't mean I feel sorry for you." He swallowed. "I lost everything." Clara tilted her head slightly. "No, you threw it away. That's different." He looked down, shame flickering across his face. "I was wrong," he said softly. "You didn't deserve what I did. You gave me everything, and I left it for something I couldn't even hold on to." There was silence, not heavy, just still. "I'm not here to ask for anything," he continued. "I just needed to say that. I don't even know what I was chasing." Clara stepped forward, hands still relaxed by her sides. "You know," she said, her voice calm, "for a long time, I wondered what was wrong with me, what I didn't give, what I didn't see. But then I realized," she paused, "you didn't break me. You revealed me." Daniel blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means," she said gently, "that if you hadn't walked out, I might have stayed small, safe, controlled. I might have continued designing perfect rooms in someone else's house. But because of you, I built something that is entirely mine." She smiled, genuinely, not kindly. "So thank you, Daniel," she said. "Thank you for the betrayal, the lies, and the silence. If you hadn't broken me, I'd never know how strong I was." He opened his mouth, maybe to speak, maybe to apologize again, but Clara had already turned. She walked toward the door to her private office and paused, hand on the frame. "Take care of yourself and Daniel?" He looked up. "You're forgiven, but don't ever mistake that for forgetting." With that, she stepped inside and closed the door behind her. On her desk sat a proposal folder embossed in silver, Luxuria Hotel Group, a global luxury chain known for its innovation and elite clientele. They wanted Clara to lead the design for their newest flagship resort. They didn't ask about her past. They asked about her vision. She sat down, opened the folder, and picked up her pen. The world outside her window kept moving. Wind in the trees, sunlight pushing through the clouds, and Clara Westwood, alone and complete, began sketching something extraordinary. Not out of revenge, not out of loss, but because she had finally become the architect of her own story. And this was only the beginning.